Today, we're going to trace an idea, one that starts with a really simple metaphor for our planet and ends up, according to our source material, as a potential blueprint for global control. It's a journey that really forces you to ask, where does a good idea like sustainability end, and where does control begin? And it all starts with this quote from Kenneth Boulding. This one sentence, it just perfectly captures a way of seeing the world, not as this endless open frontier, but as a closed system, a place with very, very real limits. And this is the real question our source material wants us to grapple with. It's a super provocative question, right? It gets right to the heart of the potential human cost when we start thinking about our planet as just a system that needs to be, well, managed. Okay, so to really get this argument, we have to go back to the very beginning. Let's take a look at the thinker who first came up with this idea of our world as a spaceship and the pretty revolutionary concept he launched with it. So here he is, Kenneth Boulding. This guy was a huge thinker in the 20th century, and he was not afraid to shake things up, especially when it came to economics. His work branched out into all sorts of fields: sociology, peace studies, and the most important one for our story today, general systems theory. I mean, just think about that metaphor for a second. Spaceship Earth. It's so simple, but it completely changes how you see our relationship with the planet. All of a sudden, we're not these conquerors of a limitless world. Nope, we're the crew on a ship. We've got limited supplies, and every single thing we do affects whether the whole system survives. An idea this powerful, it's not going to just sit in some dusty academic paper. So let's see how, according to the source, this thing grew into something much, much bigger. So what's the engine driving all of this? It's something called general systems theory. It's basically a worldview, a way of looking at everything not as a bunch of separate pieces, but as this giant web of interconnected relationships. The goal isn't just to fix one little part, it's to optimize the entire system. Now, the source material argues that you can draw a really clear line here. It all kicks off with Boulding's theory. Then, that thinking directly influences the Club of Rome's super famous Limits to Growth report. And from there, the source claims you can see the exact same DNA in the UN's Agenda 2030 goals, and finally in the World Economic Forum's idea of stakeholder capitalism. It's presented as this one single thread of thinking evolving over time. Okay, on the surface, managing the world like one big, efficient system, it sounds pretty logical, right? I mean, who doesn't want efficiency? But this is where our source material takes a sharp turn, arguing that inside this logic, there's a shockingly dehumanizing core. Now, to be fair, you have to look at the promise here. The vision is, it's a noble one. A world managed with scientific precision, for sustainability, for fairness, for the common good. I mean, who wouldn't want that? It's an incredibly appealing idea. And then, bam, the source just drops this bombshell of a question. It argues that underneath that beautiful utopian promise, there's something deeply, deeply unsettling. It's not about whether the intentions are good. It's about the very nature of the idea itself. So what we're looking at, according to the source, is this epic clash of values. On one side, you have the idea of individual dignity, that you have worth just because you're you. On the other side, you've got the needs of the system, which cares about efficiency, managing resources, and what's good for the collective above all else. And according to the source, this leads to some pretty dangerous places. People stop being seen as individuals and start being seen as data points that you have to manage. Ethics isn't about right and wrong anymore. It's about whatever makes the system run better. And your personal freedom? Well, that just becomes another variable that might need to be limited to keep the system stable. Okay, so you might be thinking, how on earth could anyone see this as ethical? Well, the source claims the answer is hidden in one single, incredibly powerful idea about what life is even for. So what's the secret ingredient here? What's the one core belief that could possibly justify putting this system before the person? What makes that seem like the right thing to do? Believe it or not, the answer the source gives us is just one word: evolution. But we're not just talking about biology here. They argue it's being used as a moral code. In this way of thinking, good is simply whatever helps the collective evolution of our species move forward. The goal is no longer your individual happiness, it's the progress of the whole. And this table, man, it really just lays it all out on the line. On one hand, you've got the evolutionary ethic, where all authority comes from human reason. On the other, a theistic ethic, where it comes from a creator. but look at that last row. That is the real kicker, according to this analysis. Is your worth based on what you contribute to the system, or is it something you're born with, something that can never be taken away? All right, this brings us to the final part of the argument. And honestly, it's the most provocative claim yet. It's the idea that this entire systems-based evolutionary worldview is actually becoming a new kind of global religion. So to back this up, the source points to this pretty wild event reported in the New American. It describes this climate repentance ceremony at a UN summit. They're talking about leaders walking up Mount Sinai with, get this, green tablets they were calling the New 10 Commandments. This is held up as proof that environmentalism is borrowing the language and symbols of religion. And then they connect the dots to a very specific figure, a theosophist named Alice Bailey. The source alleges that her writings, which were supposedly popular in circles close to the UN, pushed for a kind of spiritual evolution to bring about a new age for humanity. And this is probably the single most shocking claim in the entire analysis. It alleges that Bailey's spiritual framework wasn't exactly for everybody. In fact, it suggested that up to 75% of humanity would be spiritually unready for this big change. And those people, they would need to be removed from the planet through what was described as a kind of karmic cleansing. So, at the end of the day, it all comes down to this one final, chilling question at the heart of the source's entire argument. When the goal is to evolve humanity, and it's managed by a system that cares more about its own success than anything else, what happens to the people who just don't fit the plan? Who gets to decide who is fit enough to evolve, and who gets left behind?